She stepped off the transport chopper like a shadow. Dust swirled around her boots as the rotor blades slowed. The other soldiers, fresh from briefing, turned to look. She looked small. Light frame, helmet too big, not a single visible scar. "She looks like she just passed basic," one private muttered. Another laughed under his breath. "Great, another newbie, Doc," but the commander didn't laugh. He gave her a single nod. She returned it without a word. Her name patch read Torres. No rank displayed, no ribbons, just the medic badge on her sleeve. They didn't know that same badge had been torn, burned and stitched back on 5 separate times. Inside the base, the air was dry, walls lined with mission maps and photographs of units past. Torres set her bag down quietly in the barracks, choosing a bunk in the farthest corner. She moved with the ease of someone used to cramped quarters and even more cramped silence. The guys were already talking. "You ever notice how the medics keep getting younger? I'll bet she's never heard a shot fired in anger." "Hey, maybe she's just here to check our blood pressure, right?" Torres didn't answer. She didn't need to. A lieutenant entered the room. Sharp, clean, impatient. "All right, listen up. Tomorrow we roll out at 0600, civilian extraction, 20 clicks north. Hostile territory. We move light, fast, and silent." He glanced toward Torres, pausing just a second longer than usual. "You'll have our medic with you. She knows the terrain." That got their attention. One of the privates leaned toward another. "Knows the terrain? What, she Googled it?" Later that night, the base went quiet. Most of the team was already asleep, but Torres sat alone near the watchtower steps, cleaning her instruments. Every tool laid out with surgical precision. Hands steady, eyes distant. A young soldier approached, awkward, holding an energy bar. "You, hungry?" She looked up, blinked once. "Took the bar?" "Thanks." He lingered. "So when did you join?" 2004, she said flatly. He blinked. "Seriously?" She nodded once. "But that means—" "Wait, how old are you?" "Old enough," she said. He shifted his weight, uneasy. "I didn't mean, I figured you were new." Her voice was calm. "You figured wrong." He gave a nervous laugh and left. As she packed her gear for the mission, a photo slipped from her bag. Worn edges, faded colors. A man and a woman in uniform, arms around each other, standing in front of a Humvee. The man had a broad smile. The woman's was softer. She stared at it for a long time before tucking it back into a hidden pocket. The next morning, they rolled out just after dawn. The desert was quiet in that eerie way it gets right before something goes wrong. The convoy moved slowly, tension thick. At checkpoint 2, the lead vehicle paused. The driver called back, "Clear so far." Then an explosion. Dirt and fire ripped through the sky. The Humvee flipped sideways. Screams, gunfire, chaos. Torres was already moving. She didn't wait for orders. She didn't shout. She sprinted, crouched low, weaving between bursts of gunfire. Her bag was open before she hit the ground. A soldier was down. Chest wound, bad one. She pressed gauze, sealed it, jammed in a clotting agent. No shaking. No hesitation. Another blast nearby. Dirt showered over her. She didn't flinch. One of the privates, the same one who had joked about blood pressure, stared at her, mouth open, arm bleeding. She pointed. "Put pressure on that." "High and tight." He obeyed, instantly. "Is she even scared?" He whispered. But she wasn't listening. She was already at the next man. Tourniquet, morphine, breathing check. Move on. Within minutes, 4 soldiers were stable. Gunfire slowed. Reinforcements arrived. As they loaded the wounded into the medevac, the lieutenant turned to her. "You move like you've done this 100 times. She wiped her hands on her fatigues. 105. Silence. The private looked at her again, this time with wide eyes. "I thought she was fresh out of training," he muttered. Another soldier answered. "Then why does her name come up in briefing reports from 2 wars? Nobody joked after that. The first time Elena Torres bled in combat, she wasn't supposed to be there. Fallujah, Iraq, 2005. She had volunteered to join the convoy because one of the medics caught a fever the night before. No one expected resistance on that route. It was supposed to be a safe supply run. They were wrong. The first explosion was sudden, an IED buried beneath the road. The second was louder, closer. It turned the sky orange and sent the lead Humvee flipping sideways into a ditch. Elena was thrown off her seat, slammed hard into the side panel, but she stayed conscious. Screams filled the air. Gunfire cracked from the ridgelines. Smoke made it hard to breathe. She could have waited, could have radioed for help. But that wasn't how she was built. Grabbing her bag, she crawled out the back door. Heat pressed against her skin. She moved low, weaving between broken gear and craters. One of the soldiers was pinned behind a smoking tire. His name was Lieutenant David Riley. His face was pale, a crimson patch blooming through his vest. "Elena," he said, dazed. "What the hell are you doing?" "Keeping you alive," she replied. She slid next to him, tearing open his vest, pressing gauze into the wound. Bullets struck the dirt nearby. "She didn't stop. You're hit," he choked. She looked down. Blood ran from her thigh. A sharp burn spread through her leg. Didn't matter. She tightened the wrap on his chest. Injected morphine. When the shooting paused, she dragged him 15 meters back to the overturned Humvee, one slow step at a time, legs shaking, arms trembling. She collapsed behind cover just as the support unit arrived. Later, in the med tent, her CO came in, holding a form. "You're getting written up," he said. She blinked. "For what?" "For disobeying orders," he said, then smirked. "And for saving a lieutenant's life under direct fire. That's going to get you your first medal." "I didn't do it for that," she said. "I know," he replied. "That's why it matters." The medal came 2 weeks later. Purple Heart, the youngest female medic in her division to receive one during active combat. But she never told her family. Not even her brother, who had joined the Marines the year before. Instead, she wrote home in short sentences. "All's good here. Weather's hot. Miss you." She never mentioned the gunfire. Never the blood. What she did mention once was a boy named Jamie. "He's one of the good ones," she wrote. "Smart, stubborn, hates oatmeal. Reminds me of you." Jamie Brooks was a combat engineer from Georgia. Big laugh, bigger heart. He made everyone feel like family, and he made Elena laugh. The kind of laugh that felt out of place in a war zone. By the time she deployed again in 2007, they requested to be stationed together. Ramadi was worse than Fallujah. More traps, more ambushes, more days when the dust never settled. One morning, their squad rolled out to investigate a suspected weapons cache in a collapsed school building. Jamie was driving. Elena rode in the passenger seat. She remembers they were joking. Something about how terrible the base coffee was. Then, light, heat, silence. The world flipped. When she woke, everything hurt. Her left arm was twisted, bone showing. Her ears rang. "Jamie!" she screamed. "Jamie, talk to me!" He was pinned beneath the dashboard, face covered in soot, barely breathing. She used her good arm to reach for his hand. "You stay with me," she whispered. "Stay awake. We've got this." He tried to smile. "Doc, you look worse than me. Don't you start," she whispered, voice cracking. She didn't move from his side for 20 minutes despite the pain. Despite the growing pool of blood under her body, when help arrived, they pulled her out first. She screamed and fought to stay, but Jamie was already gone. In the hospital, they told her she'd need surgery. Pins in her elbow. Possibly months before she'd regain full use. They also told her she'd earned another Purple Heart. This time, it didn't feel like an honor. She kept Jamie's dog tag. Never wore it. Just kept it in the bottom of her bag, wrapped in the corner of an old photo. She didn't talk about Jamie. Not with counselors. Not with friends. But every time a young soldier called her Doc, she heard his voice again. And every time she walked into a firefight, she walked with him. They called it a simple mission, but Elena never trusted the word simple in war. The objective was clear. Move into the southern village of Darak to assist in evacuating civilians before nightfall. Intel suggested the area was quiet, no insurgent activity in the last week. But that's exactly when things go wrong. The new squad had been briefed. 4 vehicles, 2 squads, 1 medic. Elena stood at the edge of the planning table, arms crossed, silent. She didn't need to ask questions. She had seen this layout before. Different towns, same traps. One of the younger sergeants glanced over, speaking just loud enough for the others to hear. "I still can't believe we got her on our team." "She doesn't even look like she belongs out here," his friend snorted. "Yeah, they say she's been around, but where's the proof? No stripes, no scars, no stories." Elena didn't look at them. She didn't need to. Another soldier, older than the rest, leaned in. "You ever hear about the medic who pulled a wounded Marine out of a minefield with a broken arm?" The first one shrugged. "Urban legend." The older man looked at Elena. "I don't think so." By the time they rolled out, the desert sun was already dropping. Inside the armored truck, the same young Sergeant Anderson sat across from her. He tried to break the silence. "So, Staff Sergeant, what's your kill count?" She didn't answer. "Or maybe you don't talk unless someone's bleeding." She stared at him, calm, unreadable. Then said softly, 3. He leaned back, surprised. 3? She nodded. 3 friends I couldn't save. The truck went quiet. When they reached Darak, everything felt too still. Doors half open, no movement. Laundry hanging from a window swaying in the wind. The lieutenant gave the order. "Move quick. Keep your eyes open." They began clearing buildings, moving family by family to the extraction zone. That's when it happened. A scream. Then gunfire. From the rooftops and alleyways, armed fighters emerged. It was a trap. Radio chatter exploded. "Ambush north side. We're pinned at building 2. Multiple wounded." Elena was already running. She found the first soldier, Private Daniels, clutching his stomach behind a broken wall. Blood soaked through his vest. She dropped beside him, ripped open his armor, and pressed gauze into the wound. "I can't feel my legs," he gasped. "You don't need to," she said. "You just need to breathe." A round cracked above her head. She didn't flinch. She applied the tourniquet, checked his pulse, gave him a shot of morphine, and called for evac. 2 blocks south, she radioed. "1 down, stable. I need cover now." Another soldier screamed nearby. Elena moved again. She found Sergeant Miller with shrapnel in his neck, gasping, eyes wild. She rolled him gently, inserted a nasal airway, patched the bleeding. Gunfire drew closer. A grenade went off behind her. The blast knocked her forward, dirt and smoke filling her lungs. Her ears rang. Her hand shook, but she didn't stop. She dragged Miller behind a water tank, tied off the bleeding, then turned back into the fight. The team began to fall back, pushing civilians ahead of them. Anderson was limping, blood dripping from his thigh. He saw her coming. "Doc, don't worry about me." She grabbed his vest, pulled him behind cover, and slapped on a bandage. "Stop talking. Start breathing." He stared at her, pain and confusion in his eyes. "You're not afraid, are you?" he asked. She looked down at her blood-covered hands, then back at him. "I'm always afraid," she said. "That's why I'm careful." They made it to the extraction point. Helicopters roared overhead. Dust whipped into the air. As the last civilians climbed aboard, Elena checked her bag. Empty of supplies, full of blood. The lieutenant approached her, face streaked with sweat and soot. "You just saved 7 men," he said. She nodded once. 8. If Anderson doesn't bleed out, he grinned, shaking his head. "They told me you were good. They didn't say you were a ghost." Anderson sat nearby, watching her. "You really have 5 Purple Hearts?" he asked. She didn't answer. He looked away, ashamed. "Sorry about earlier. I didn't know." She sat down beside him, opened a bottle of water, and handed it to him. "You're still alive," she said. "That's all that matters." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, from the chopper above, the radio crackled. "Command says to send our medic back with the civvies. She's too valuable to risk again." The lieutenant looked at her. "You want to sit this one out?" She stared at the rising smoke over Darak, at the wounded, at the still-burning fear in Anderson's eyes. "No," she said. "I go where the bleeding starts." The silence in the barracks was louder than any battlefield. Elena sat alone, wrapping fresh bandages around her ribs. The bruises from the blast in Darak were deep, but she hadn't gone to the med tent. She rarely did. Pain was just another part of the job now. Her locker was open beside her, and inside it, folded neatly, was the old photo of her and Jamie. She hadn't looked at it in weeks. Not since her last mission with the 21st Infantry, but tonight felt heavier. The image showed them smiling. Young, proud, invincible. They had believed they'd make it home together. Believed they'd grow old and complain about the heat, the dust, and the bad food. She leaned against the cool metal of the locker and closed her eyes. Ramadi, 2007. Jamie had just found out his sister was pregnant. He was going to be an uncle. He couldn't stop talking about it. "I'm going to teach that kid to fish," he'd said, laughing. "And to run fast from dumb sergeants with opinions." She smiled at the memory. He'd always been louder than her, braver in ways that had nothing to do with bullets. They were assigned to sweep an abandoned school that day. Elena remembered how he'd teased her for triple-checking her medical bag. "Doc, you could restock a hospital with that kit." "You never complain when I use it on you," she'd replied. He'd grinned, flashing that crooked tooth he always meant to get fixed. The explosion came as they reached the second floor. No warning, no sound. Just heat, pressure, and the sickening roar of metal ripping through concrete. When she opened her eyes, she couldn't move her arm. Blood dripped down her fingers. Dust filled her mouth, but all she could think about was Jamie. He was buried under a section of collapsed wall, half conscious. His leg was crushed. She crawled to him, dragging her broken arm behind her. "You're okay," she kept saying. "You're okay. I've got you." He looked up at her, eyes glassy. "It hurts, Doc. I know," she said. "Stay with me." The radio was dead. Her voice was all he had. "I'm not leaving you," she whispered. "You hear me?" "You're not alone," he smiled faintly. "Figures you'd be here." Minutes felt like hours. She kept pressure on his wound, kept whispering stories about Texas sunsets, cheap beer, and better days. By the time the rescue team arrived, her uniform was soaked in his blood. They pulled her out first. She fought them, screamed his name, but Jamie was gone. Later, in the field hospital, the doctor said she was lucky. Said the shrapnel had missed her artery by inches. They handed her another Purple Heart. She didn't speak. Just stared out the window, clutching Jamie's dog tag in her left hand. Back at base, they held a small ceremony. Elena didn't attend. Instead, she wrote a letter to Jamie's sister. Simple words, no details, just that he was brave, that he wasn't alone, and that he had talked about her baby right until the end. She never told her own family, never said that her nightmares had a name. Years passed. Deployments blurred into one another. But that day in Ramadi never faded. That was the day something inside her changed. Not her courage. That stayed, but her silence grew. Her smile disappeared, and every time she heard someone joke about medics being just support, she'd feel her fingers tighten. She had bled beside the people she couldn't save, held their hands, watched their eyes go still. There was nothing just about it. One night, a new recruit asked her what her worst scar was. She pointed to her left shoulder, where the shrapnel had gone in. He nodded, impressed. Then she pointed to her chest. "And here," she said quietly. "But you can't see that one." He didn't ask again. Back in the present, Elena took the photo from her locker and placed it gently into her chest pocket. A knock at the door broke the stillness. It was Anderson. "Lieutenant wants us at briefing in 10, he said. Then he paused. "You okay?" She nodded. "I'm fine. You sure?" She looked him in the eye. "We've got work to do." He hesitated, then nodded. As he turned to leave, she added, "And Anderson?" "Yeah?" "Thanks for asking." She stood up, strapped her gear over her bruised ribs, and headed toward the command room. The war didn't stop for grief, but she carried it anyway. Quietly, like a second skin. The new guy thought he was funny. Private Kyle Brennan, 19, just deployed. Still had sand in his boots from basic. He was all nerves and noise, pacing the barracks like he was waiting for a movie to start. When Elena walked in, he looked up, did a double take, and smirked. "You're the medic?" he asked. She nodded once, didn't stop moving. Unclipped her helmet, set it down, started checking her gear. Brennan leaned toward another soldier, stage whispering like a school kid. "I thought we were getting someone from the field, not someone from a nursing school." The room went quiet. No one laughed. Not even Anderson. Elena didn't look up. She checked the sharpness of her trauma shears. Then the seal on her tourniquet pouch. Finally, she said calmly, "You ever treat a sucking chest wound with a credit card, Brennan?" He blinked. "What? No?" she said, snapping the shears closed. "Then sit down." Brennan sat. The next mission came fast. A rural recon op turned extraction. Word was, a small family, mother, 2 kids, were hiding from insurgents who had taken over their village. Satellite showed movement. Command wanted eyes on the ground. Elena wasn't supposed to go this time. But when the squad medic sprained his ankle the night before, she volunteered. The lieutenant didn't argue. At dawn, 2 vehicles rolled out. Elena rode in the second, seated across from Brennan. He was unusually quiet. She looked up. "You sleep last night?" He shook his head. "Didn't feel right." She didn't smile. "It never does." They reached the edge of the village by mid-morning. The air was hot, thick with tension. Birds circled overhead, but the streets were empty, too empty. The team moved in, clearing buildings one by one. Elena stayed with the rear unit, scanning rooftops, checking corners, watching Brennan fumble with his gear. They found the family in a narrow basement beneath a collapsed house. The mother was clutching a toddler, the older boy trembling in silence. Eyes wide, no shoes, no water, and then the radio crackled. "Contact North Alley, multiple hostiles." Gunfire erupted. Sharp, close. Bullets cracked against the walls. The family screamed, "Go!" The lieutenant shouted. "Cover the civilians, fall back to the convoy." Elena moved first. Grabbed the toddler, pulled the mother close, shouted for Anderson to grab the boy. Brennan hesitated, frozen, until she barked, "Move!" They ran through the narrow streets, weaving between burned cars and crumbling walls. A shot rang out, and Brennan fell. Elena dropped to her knees beside him. Blood soaked through his pant leg. He was shaking, eyes wild. I can't feel my foot," he gasped. She opened his cargo pocket, sliced through the fabric. Blood was pouring out too fast. Femoral artery. She pressed hard, shouting, "Tourniquet!" Anderson tossed one. She wrapped it high, tight, faster than most doctors ever could. "You're not dying today, Brennan," she said. "Not on my watch." He tried to speak, but his lips trembled. "Breathe," she snapped. "Look at me. Focus. More shots." The walls behind them chipped and cracked from incoming fire. She pulled Brennan into cover, pressed gauze to his leg, radioed the convoy. Medic to command. Urgent evac. 1 critical. Civilian children secured. Need airlift in under 10. Static. Then, chopper inbound. ETA 8 minutes. 8 minutes was a lifetime under fire, and Elena knew it. She leaned in, whispered, "You're gonna make it. You're stronger than you look." Brennan managed a weak smile. "You're not what I expected." She gave him a glance. "No one ever is." When the chopper arrived, wind and dust blasted the courtyard. The squad formed a tight line, firing back as Elena dragged Brennan across the yard. The pilot lowered a rope. Anderson went up first with the boy, then the mother, then Elena with Brennan, his face pale, sweat pouring down his temples. Inside the bird, she kept pressure on his wound, talking non-stop to keep him conscious. When they landed back at base, the medics took over, and Brennan was rushed into surgery. Elena walked out of the med bay without a word, sat down on a crate outside, pulled off her gloves. Her hands were shaking. Anderson found her there 10 minutes later. "Surgeon says he's gonna live," he said. She nodded once. "He asked for you. Said, he owes you a leg." She chuckled softly, without humor. "Tell him he can pay me back by listening next time." Anderson sat beside her, quiet. After a while, he said, "That's number 4, isn't it?" She didn't answer. He glanced at her side where blood had soaked through her vest. "You're hit," she shrugged. "Just a graze." He looked at her with something close to awe. "Why do you keep doing this?" She looked up at the sky, expression unreadable. "Because someone once stayed with me," she said, "when it would have been easier to run." She didn't say Jamie's name. She never did. The orders came in just after midnight. High-value target. Remote location? Suspected chemical weapons lab hidden beneath an abandoned medical outpost. Intel was shaky, but pressure from command was clear. Go in, confirm, extract. It wasn't Elena's kind of mission. This one wasn't about saving lives. It was about eliminating threats, but they needed a medic. And not just any medic, someone who could stay calm in confined spaces, under fire, and in suits that made breathing feel like drowning. Elena didn't hesitate. The team gathered before dawn. Faces tight, voices low, Lieutenant Cross laid out the plan. This is a 3-phase operation. Insert, breach, secure. Hostile presence expected. Minimal collateral. Place may still have live chemicals. We've got 15 minutes max inside the compound. Anderson glanced at Elena. You ever clear a lab before? She didn't blink. I've cleared worse. They went in via Blackhawk, touching down a half-mile from the outpost. The sun hadn't risen yet, and the desert was black and silent. Everyone wore full mop gear, mission-oriented protective posture. Thick suits, sealed gloves, breathing masks. It made movement stiff, voices muffled. Every breath sounded like a struggle. Elena double-checked her med bag, sealed her mask tight, then followed the team into the compound. The building was half buried in sand. The outer walls had collapsed, but the inner lab structure held. Metal doors rusted but intact. Sergeant Voss used a breaching charge. One flash, one boom, and they were inside. The stench hit them first. Rot, chemicals, and something metallic. The floor was littered with old syringes. Broken lights and overturned tables. They moved room by room. No hostiles, just silence. Then a thud from below. They found a hatch beneath a steel table. It creaked when opened. Stairs led down into darkness. The lieutenant gave the order. Torres, stay topside. If we need evac, you're the first call. But Elena shook her head. If someone gets hit down there, you won't have time to get them back up. He stared at her for a second, then nodded once. They descended together. The lower level was a maze. Corridors of sealed rooms. Shattered glass and strange symbols painted on the walls in red. They moved slowly. Guns up, lights scanning. Then came the trap. A wire snapped. A hiss filled the air, and then screaming. Voss dropped instantly, clutching his leg. A gas canister rolled across the floor. Yellow smoke hissed from the valve. Masks on tight, Elena shouted. Voss was convulsing. Blood soaked through his suit. Anderson dragged him behind cover. Elena knelt beside him, tearing open her med kit. Puncture wound. Toxin exposure. I need to inject now! She pulled the auto-injector, jammed it into his thigh. Pressure dressing. Anderson, now! He passed it. She wrapped it tight. Checked his pulse. Watched his pupils. He was still seizing. Second dose, she muttered. Hold him down! Another shot. Another scream. Then stillness. He wasn't dead. But he was close. Extraction! Now, she said into her radio. Negative, came the reply. Hostiles inbound. Chopper has to hold. Elena looked at the others. Then we carry him. They moved fast, dragging Voss through the lower corridors. Gunfire erupted from the hatch above. They were surrounded, trapped underground with one man bleeding out and no way out. Elena pressed herself against the wall, mind racing. Then she saw it, an old ventilation shaft in the far corner. Rusted, but big enough to crawl through. She turned to the lieutenant. I can fit. It runs back toward the perimeter. I can mark a safe exit point. He hesitated. It's suicide, Anderson said. Not if I move fast, Elena replied. And if I don't go, Voss won't make it. She dropped her bag. Took only what she needed. Flare, radio, her smallest med kit. Cover me for 30 seconds, and then she was gone. The shaft was narrow, hot, claustrophobic. Each breath echoed inside her mask. She crawled on elbows and knees, dirt scraping her suit. Her ribs ached with every movement. At one point she stopped. Jamie's voice filled her mind. You don't stop crawling, Doc, even if it feels like hell. She pushed forward. 10 minutes. Then daylight. She emerged behind a collapsed dune, marked the spot with the flare, and radioed command. Extraction point marked. Bring the bird. Bring it now. Minutes later, the Black Hawk descended. Smoke, wind, roar. She waved them in, then led them back to the entrance. The team emerged one by one. Anderson had Voss slung over his back. They made it, barely. Back at base, Voss was stabilized. Poison neutralized. Elena stood outside the quarantine tent, covered in dirt and blood, her mask hanging loose around her neck. Anderson approached. "You crawled through a chemical shaft alone," he said. She didn't answer. "You get why they say you've got ice in your veins now, right?" She met his eyes. "It's not ice. Then what is it?" "Loss," she said, and not wanting to feel it again. He nodded slowly. They stood there in silence, the sun rising behind them, and Elena, once again, didn't wait for praise. She just went to refill her med kit. They told her it was just a training exercise, standard joint force operation. Mixed units, simulated combat. No live fire, but Elena had been in the military long enough to know sometimes the most dangerous missions wear the calmest faces. The base was somewhere in northern Europe. Cold wind, heavy skies, foreign voices moving through tents. NATO uniforms mixed with American gear. She was brought in last minute, not as a medic, but as an observer. "You're here to evaluate medical response times," said the brass. Nothing more. She said nothing, just nodded, but the moment she stepped onto the training ground, something felt off. Too much tension in the air. Too many experienced soldiers walking too quietly. And then she saw him, Colonel Mason Hart, former intelligence, Cold War veteran, and Jamie's old commanding officer. She hadn't seen him in years. He approached her slowly, eyes sharp beneath gray brows. "Elena Torres," he said. "Still saving lives, I see. Still sending people into places they don't come back from?" She replied. He gave a thin smile. "I heard you got your 5th Purple Heart?" She didn't smile back. "What is this really, Colonel?" He leaned closer. "It's not a drill." "Not for you. We have an asset embedded with a rogue unit. Extraction failed. We're staging this exercise as cover." She stiffened. "And you want me?" "You were requested," he said. "By name." Her breath caught. "Who?" He handed her a file. Inside was a photo, a woman. Blonde hair, hardened expression, eyes that knew war. Her name was Talia Monroe, former field medic. Vanished 3 years ago after a failed operation in Syria. "She's alive," Hart said, deep undercover. "And bleeding intel we need, but she's burned. Her team is compromised, and she's injured." Elena stared at the photo. "You want me to bring her back?" "I want you to do what only you can do," Hart said. "Reach her, patch her up, and walk her out alive. No orders, no backup, no guarantee. Just her, a radio, and a set of coordinates." She left that night, dropped by unmarked chopper into thick woods on the edge of a crumbling village. The ground was frozen. Her breath showed in clouds. She moved quietly, dressed like a civilian, gear tucked into an old hiking bag. The village was dead silent. Burned-out buildings, graffiti on the stone walls, a stray dog barking in the distance. Then she saw the signal, a red scarf tied to a balcony. She entered the house below it. One step at a time. Inside it was dark, cold, empty, until a voice whispered, "Close the door." Elena turned slowly. Talia stood behind her. Gun drawn, eyes wild. She looked thinner, pale, one arm hanging useless at her side. "Talia," Elena said quietly. "You shouldn't be here," she rasped. "They sent me to bring you home." "There is no home," she said. "Not after what I've done." Elena took a slow step forward. "You're hurt. Let me see." Talia didn't lower the gun. "You stitched up Anderson after a mortar hit," she said. "You used a fishing hook and a prayer." Elena froze. "How did you—" Talia's hand trembled. "I listened to your name on radio chatter for years. You're a ghost, a legend. I didn't believe you were real until now." "You're bleeding through your coat," Elena said. "Let me help." Talia lowered the weapon. Elena moved fast. Checked the shoulder. Deep laceration, infected. She pulled out antibiotics. A field suture kit. Talia winced, but didn't flinch. "You've been alone a long time," Elena said. "Long enough to forget how to trust anyone." but not long enough to forget my name, she replied. They sat in silence while Elena cleaned the wound. Then Talia said, I wasn't supposed to survive that last mission. I stayed because I had no one left. And I thought maybe I could make up for what we lost. Elena tied off the suture. You're not the only one carrying ghosts. Talia looked at her. You still wear his dog tag? Elena didn't answer. I knew Jamie, Talia whispered. He talked about you like you were the only reason he believed in the uniform. The air went still. Elena stood. We leave in 1 hour. You can walk? Barely. Then we crawl. They moved out before sunrise. Every step was dangerous. Patrols searched the woods. Drones circled above. But Elena led them through old irrigation ditches, beneath fences, across icy fields. Her breath burned. Her ribs screamed, but she didn't stop, and neither did Talia. Just before extraction, they came under fire. 2 shadows emerged from the tree line. Elena shoved Talia down, returned fire. 1 shot, 2. Then silence. They reached the evac point just as the chopper descended. Talia collapsed onto the ramp. Elena stayed on her knees, eyes scanning the woods, not for enemies, for memories, for the ghosts she still carried. As the bird lifted off, Talia reached out and squeezed her hand. Thank you, she said, for not giving up on me. Elena nodded once. I never give up on medics. The ceremony was quiet. No parade, no music. Just rows of soldiers standing at attention and a flag fluttering in the late afternoon wind. Elena stood in dress uniform, the 5th Purple Heart pinned to her chest. The general shook her hand firmly, his voice low but steady. You've saved more lives than most doctors in a lifetime. You're not just a soldier, Torres. You're the soul of this unit. Cameras clicked, but she barely noticed. Her eyes wandered to the empty chairs at the edge of the field, the ones meant for family. They remained unclaimed. After the ceremony, Anderson approached with a fresh bandage on his arm and a crooked smile. You made it to 5, he said. She gave a dry laugh. Didn't plan on it. No one ever does. Talia was there too, still limping slightly but out of danger. She stood near the med tent watching the flag with tired eyes. Since the extraction, she'd said little. Trauma ran deep, but Elena understood. Some wounds don't close with stitches. Back at the barracks, a small box sat on Elena's bed. No note, no name, just a worn-out set of dog tags and a folded letter. She recognized the tags instantly. Jamie's. Her throat tightened. Hands trembling, she opened the letter. Doc, I wrote this before Ramadi, just in case. If you're reading it, you already know. I never told you how much it meant to have you there. Not just for me, but for all of us. You weren't just patching us up. You were holding us together. If I don't make it, don't carry it like it's your fault. You were the best damn medic I ever saw, and the strongest woman I ever met. Live for both of us, all right? Someone's got to keep the rookies in line. Jamie, her fingers clenched the paper. It had taken years for this letter to reach her, and yet it came exactly when she needed it. Later that evening, she walked alone to the edge of base where the trees met the fence line. In the fading light, she stood beneath a wooden cross nailed into an old oak tree. Soldiers had carved names into the bark, those they'd lost, those they couldn't forget. She added one more, Jamie R. Callahan. Then, below it, she carved another, Talia Monroe, found. Behind her, Anderson's voice broke the silence. They're retiring your deployment status. She turned. What? Command's making it official. You're being pulled from combat duty. They want you at the medical school. Training new field medics, she blinked. I didn't ask for that. No, he said. But they're giving it anyway. Said you've earned the right to come home. She looked down at her hands, scarred, steady, still ready. Do you think it's enough? She asked quietly. Teaching? Staying behind while others go into the fire? Anderson shook his head. I think it's time someone else learned to carry what you've carried. Elena didn't answer. But that night, in her quarters, she opened her footlocker. Inside were the things she never let anyone touch. Jamie's old photo, the field knife from her first mission, and a small notebook filled with names and blood types. She added one more name at the bottom. Kyle Brennan, femoral bleed, survived. Then she closed it, sealed the locker, and packed her gear for the last time. The next morning, the transport truck waited by the gate. Talia and Anderson stood beside it, watching her with quiet pride. She slung her bag over her shoulder, took one last look at the base that had become her battleground, her graveyard and her home. As she climbed aboard, a young private jogged up with wide eyes. "Ma'am, are you Staff Sergeant Torres?" "Yes," she said. He looked nervous. "I just wanted to say, my brother's alive because of you. Afghanistan, 2019. You treated him after the IED. He always talks about the woman who never flinched." She smiled faintly. "Tell him I said thanks for staying alive." The truck rolled out. Through the chain-link fence, the base disappeared behind her. But the weight of her story didn't. She wasn't leaving the war. She was carrying it forward, in every lesson, every trainee, every name remembered. They had called her the Ghost Medic. The woman who looked like fresh training but carried 5 Purple Hearts. But Elena Torres was more than a legend. She was a witness to sacrifice, to survival, to the quiet, unspoken courage of those who run toward the pain, not away from it. And now, for the first time in years, she was going home.